20 years ago, a group of employees started Ericsson Response, a voluntarily set up communication network during crises around the world. They too see an increase in the number of disasters that are partly caused by climate change. Lars Ruediger, Program Director of Ericsson, will tell us about it.
Thank you very much for having me here. It's very appreciated. I'm quite glad that I had my predecessors here in this session who were talking about climate change, because I'm not really an expert in climate change. I'm not a scientific person, I'm an engineer. So I'm working for Ericsson. I'm working full-time with the Ericsson Response program, so I'm the program director. And with this, I'm responsible for our partnerships, for the volunteers in the program, and for the operational management, so when we deploy to the field. So I will try in this session to give a little bit an insight on the context that we're working. So context inside the company, but also context, of course, towards the humanitarian world. And I want to also talk a little bit about connectivities in emergencies, what's actually the role of connectivity. So to give you a very brief introduction into Ericsson, I don't want to elaborate too much on numbers and figures, but for those who have not seen much of Ericsson before, it's maybe good to know and understand that we are a telecom provider, a telecom service provider. So operators are part of our main customers. So we work mainly in these four areas. In the networks or radio transmission, but it's also digital services management, managed services, and things like these new technologies, new business, IoT solution, 5G, those are important parts. So Ericsson is also very focused on sustainability in general and to have a sustainable business. And the strategic areas for sustainability are this responsible business, like child labor, for instance, human rights, environmental sustainability, that's climate protection, circular economy, and energy consumption of our products. And there's one pillar which is called digital inclusion, where Ericsson Response is actually located. So we have two programs. The one is Ericsson Response for emergency response operations. And we have a second program, which is called Connect to Learn, which is more focusing on educational, on the educational programs, projects together with our customers. I would like to show you a very short video. It's like 60 seconds. Okay, so I hope you can also hear the sound.
Communication up and working again.
Our job as responders.
There is no infrastructure left after a disaster. So we have to bring everything to get the communication up and working again.
Our job as responders is to bring connectivity in a theater of desolation.
When Ericsson Response started, hardly any organization was using IT in emergencies.
Just being able to make a phone call was a breakthrough.
Nowadays, we create hotspots, supply the internet connectivity to the exact buildings that need to be linked together.
Lars Magnus Ericsson founded the company on the premise that communication should be available for all. Over 140 years, we have remained true to our founder's vision.
Yeah, so I think this video was the one which kind of caught the attraction to Ericsson Response, and that's probably also the reason why I'm talking here today. So this video was done for our 20 years anniversary that we had last year in 2020. So Ericsson Response is a disaster response organization. So we respond to natural disasters, but also to other humanitarian crises together with our partners. The idea, as you also heard in the video, is not really new. The idea was coming really from the roots when the company was founded in 1867, where communication was really seen as a humanitarian need. And this was picked up by a group of volunteers 20 years ago who founded Ericsson Response. So they saw that they were sitting on something really powerful when it comes to technology and to skills. And they said, out of an initiative from employees, they founded that program. So out of this, we created this mission that we say, okay, when our humanitarian partners call us, then we deploy together with them. We want to leverage from our volunteers, from our technology, the competence, in order to support humanitarian operations. So far, we have done close to 60 operations in 40 different countries over the past 20 years. And our principles are always that we're not profit. I mean, a lot of people, everyone is non-profit, but we're not commercial, so we're not advertising with what we're doing. Yeah, we talk about that, but you will not see something, buy our products because we are doing something good. And we are, of course, non-political, and this is going a little bit together with the general humanitarian principles. So we kind of slot into this humanitarian world. We have three main elements in the program. So our biggest asset, I would say, are the volunteers. So we have between 140 and 150 volunteers in our rosters who are deploying to emergencies, but who are also working from home, from the back office, remote supporting operations. If we have equipment deployed, we might need remote support. It's about development work. It's about testing our solutions. It's about different profiles like logistics, internal administrative support, and so on. So we are spread quite well over the globe with the volunteers. We have currently volunteers in about 30 countries with 29 languages. So this gives us quite a good base for interaction. So for instance, during the pandemic, it was of course a little bit difficult to deploy people. There was no international travels, but still we had one volunteer contributing to the explosion in Lebanon, to the assessment from our partners. So we had a local volunteer in Lebanon. Same thing a year earlier. We had someone supporting activities in Libya where no international travel was possible into the country or out of the country due to security and visa reasons. So those are situations where we can leverage from that. Then we have the technology pillar. We don't want to take a piece of technology or a product and say, oh, this is a fantastic solution for the humanitarian world, and kind of make the problem fit our solution. So we work together with our partners. We try to see what is actually needed, and we try to fill that gap. And we, of course, try to leverage from technology which is available, but it's not really limited only to our own products. We have two main components. The one is Wi-Fi, wireless LAN solution, which is then providing an access network connectivity to humanitarian workers. And we have, of course, also from the telecom area, a lot of telco equipment on stock, like 2G, 3G, 4G, complete networks, but also components out of that network that we can use. Our main partner right now is the Emergency Telecom Cluster from the UN. So we're working closely together with them to see and identify what we can actually contribute from a technology and from a skills perspective. This is wider than just technology. It's also about training. It's about collaboration, about communication, that when a disaster strikes, everyone knows what he has to do. We have also worked in the past with other organizations, with UNICEF, Save the Children, with the Federation Red Cross. We have done things. But the Emergency Telecom Cluster is currently our main partner, because the Emergency Telecom Cluster is an organization which consists of a number of organizations. It's a network, an organizational network, and they serve the humanitarian community. So basically, in a disaster, when the cluster is activated, all the UN agencies, NGOs, they leverage from that service. So that means our impact is much broader than just focusing on one organization. These are just a few pictures of our telco solutions. So it's about containers, it's about standalone ruggedized outdoor 3G networks for mobile data. We have all that on stock, including satellite dishes. But the most deployed solution is the wireless LAN part that we're doing. This shouldn't give a deep dive into the technical part, but it should just explain that there's more than just a wireless LAN access point like you have at home. We're talking here about a network, about linking sites together, which are up to 30 kilometers away from each other, connecting really those buildings which need the connectivity, hospitals, stadium, ports, police stations sometimes. Yeah. Beside the wireless LAN infrastructure, we also provide an access controller, because normally when infrastructure is damaged, you have a very limited backhaul like a satellite dish, and you need to make sure that all the users get really the bandwidth which is needed, and that is equally distributed, yeah, so that we have also the right people who are using the network. The telecom cluster, ETC Telecom, the emergency telecom cluster, has a certain mandate. So we don't want to serve militaries, or we don't want to serve also media with connectivity. The purpose is to serve the responding community, so that hospitals, police stations have connectivity again. So for this, we have an access controller, so we can monitor the traffic, we can decide what traffic is allowed, and we can decide who gets actually access to the network. This is here an example from Dominica, from Rousseau. So the network is building over time, but the time to set it up is fairly small. So we talk about 1 or 2 days, and then we have set something up which is also sustainable against more wind or maybe another earthquake. I'd like to talk a little bit also the type of emergencies that we are working with. Natural disasters is definitely one part. The emergency telecom cluster becomes activated as soon as a government sees that the national capacity to respond to such an event is not sufficient anymore, that the neighbors, the region cannot respond sufficiently anymore, and that they are overwhelmed. And then the government can invite the international humanitarian community to respond. This is called then a level 3 emergency. So there's a lot more emergencies which are happening in countries where the national capacity is sufficient. And so what Martin was talking about, many of the countries which face disasters, natural disasters, they can still cope with the help of the national societies of the Red Cross with their own emergency response capabilities sufficiently. And then there are more vulnerable countries which are then not able to respond appropriately anymore, and to activate then certain components. So this is a snapshot from the etcluster.org webpage. So that's the official webpage from this cluster. And you can see here how many parallel crises are ongoing at the moment. So level 3 emergencies where the governments have invited the humanitarian community to respond, and where a gap in communication was identified. So it's currently 7 of those emergencies. So it's mainly man-made disasters, conflict areas. refugee situations. So we are currently supporting in Bangladesh, and we are supporting the Central African Republic. We don't have stuff on the ground, but we still have equipment there. So this map, if you look at that, this belt is also a very famous picture. Actually, you will see that from many humanitarian organizations, that there's a sort of belt around the globe where you have the vulnerable countries, and where you also have the most type of disasters like conflicts or climate-caused disasters like hurricanes, earthquakes. This is just a small list of the major engagements that we had over the past 20 years. There's also a few videos linked in, so I will share afterwards also the PDF file where you have the link, so you could click on those if you would like to learn more about the individual emergencies. But we can say that we were part of pretty much every major disaster in the past 20 years. So coming now a little bit to the importance of connectivity, there's a good example from the earthquake in Nepal in 2015. When you looked at the media coverage, there was a lot of information about 20 plus mountaineers who got stuck on the Mount Everest. There was a bit of reporting about what happened inside Kathmandu, but when it came to the outskirts, to the countryside, there was pretty much silence on this. So this is less an indication of how severe a situation is. This is more giving an idea about the available communication equipment that you find. Yeah, so the guys on the Mount Everest were nicely equipped with satellite phones, and they could reach out to the outside world, while the countryside of Nepal was a bit more cut off. Of course, a lot of media organizations like networks are coming with appropriate equipment themselves, so that's actually the foundation to do a good reporting. But you can generally say, the less you hear in an emergency, the worse the situation is actually. The more it's cut off, the more need there's likely to be for response. And that's for us also when we talk with our partners, we analyze those things and we say, okay, how bad can it be? What information do we have? There's a lot of information sharing, so that we can decide what the appropriate measures are. So this modern communication equipment is, of course, a great opportunity. It's a great asset that we can connect quite easily to the outside world when it's available, but it also brings a lot of responsibility. We need to have a faster assessment. I mean, the humanitarian response has to be as fast as the media coverage, let's say. We have to react faster because we have better information available, quicker. And it's also demanding a faster international response, of course. The media coverage is of course attracting donors, which is a basic foundation for a lot of operations of a lot of organizations, like governmental and non-governmental organizations, like UN agencies, like the Red Cross as well. There's a big demand on donations and on the funding, and the more you hear and the more you get out of the disaster areas, the more coverage you have, the more donors are actually attracted, and the funding status is improving. If you go to this webpage that I showed earlier from etcluster.org, if you click on this individual emergencies, you will also see the funding status. So if there's a country that you have hardly heard about, it's very likely that you also see limited funding availability. It's always said, okay, how much funding is required and how much funding is actually provided so far. is already my last slide. There's a difference between the connectivity and the communication in the end. So in order to have an efficient response, you need coordination. Coordination requires communication, and communication requires connectivity. So these are the different steps. And we are trying to work basically on all of them. The technical solution, the technical foundation to mitigate connectivity gaps is one thing which is important, but it's also how are emergencies coordinated. So the network between the different organizations is super important. The information sharing is super important. In a video that you find in this list of links is one about Nepal. There was a statement from the emergency coordinator, which I found very good. He said, if I should put my finger on the two most important elements in a disaster response, then it's about logistics and it's about communication. If you can't talk, nothing works, and if you can't move, then nothing goes anywhere. So this is it's actually work that is ongoing. We see every year more and more crises coming up. Initially, I think the cluster was equipped for like 3 parallel emergencies, if I'm remembering right. Now we have like 7 ongoing emergencies. So there's a huge demand on partners. There's a huge demand also on finding new ways how to deal with such disasters, because a very important aspect is we want to fill gaps, but we don't want to create any kind of competition. Offering internet for free when there's an internet service provider. So this kind of shadow economy that is created by humanitarians sometimes, this is a very important aspect also for this cluster. So new ways, new technologies enable new things. The resilience in countries is improving a lot. You see more and more quicker recovery of the mobile networks. The operators are adapting, especially in the vulnerable countries. And if we take, for instance, as a last word, a disaster like the Bahamas in 2019, we pulled out of that emergency after 2 weeks. The situation was super bad. That was not a question. There was a high level of devastation, but the gap in connectivity, that was filled very quickly. They evacuated from the affected islands the population. The networks were recovered quite quickly because of good preparation, and that made us obsolete after 2-3 weeks already, which is in that sense an ideal emergency. I mean, we should stay there for a longer time. You have other disasters. If you look in Bangladesh, the refugee crisis, there's not really an end to see. If you look at Yemen, Syria, Central African Republic, this is dragging on for a long time.
Yeah.
So
thank you.
Yeah, by this I would like to close. Thank you very much.
That's really a clear story. I wonder, do you have direct connections with news media?
Sorry, with whom?
Do you have direct connections with the news media?
No, not really. I mean, media media relations is for every organization a kind of important aspect. I mean, we are not, when we are operating together with the emergency telecom cluster, this media relation is handled through World Food Program and through those organizations. We are just supporting them. We don't have an own media relation in that sense during emergencies. Yeah, but it is a very integral part. I remember from the earthquake in Haiti, there was media going in and out in the UNICEF office every day, and that was a very normal thing. And the media relations people inside UNICEF were then looking for the right stories, putting the right numbers together in order to give a good overview on the operations that were happening. Yeah, so there was every morning at 7 a briefing, and all the parties inside that briefing from UNICEF actually collected the information to present that to the media and find maybe the right content for certain interviews. Every piece of bandwidth that is not used for the humanitarian response, we try also to make available to affected population, for instance, in hotspots. This is an initiative from the emergency telecom cluster as well, so that people can use their WhatsApp, Skype in order to send messages. Sometimes after weeks, they have the first time the opportunity to send a message to the outside world, so that that kind of interest from affected populations very much on super basic, essential communication to the outside world, getting information, so what is actually happening around me. What is, of course, in terms of this entertainment stuff like Netflix and YouTube, I mean, some humanitarian organizations need that because YouTube is doing, I don't know, is in instruction videos, and so it's used for the work sometimes. But we must also not forget that the people are working in really high stress, in really bad conditions. So if there's a chance, let's say in the video in the evening to relax for a moment and maybe do a little bit of spare time, talk with relatives, maybe doing this kind of things like watching a video, this is super important for the well-being of the staff. So I think this is a component where we say, okay, it's not essentially network for the needed for the response as such, but it's super essential for the well-being of the people, and it's harsh conditions and harsh environments. So it's definitely on the radar to say, you know, we have to make sure that this is well in balance.
Can I ask a question? How does it work in countries where there are problems like wars or hostile problems where I suppose the government doesn't want you to come? How do you deal with that?
From the emergency telecom cluster perspective, I mean, we're working with partners together, because we're not saying, oh yeah, this is a disaster where we want to, you know, contribute. So we really work together with the partners. And the humanitarians are normally invited to that country by the government. It's not that they are kind of going by themselves. The Red Cross has a different assignment, so they can also work on the base of a different mandate. Yeah? But we are going when we are invited. Of course, you have situations where humanitarians are more or less welcome. I think this is dependent very much on the country.
Yes, but do they always know that you also come? Because I imagine that they want the humanitarians to come, but they don't want the communication about the conflict to go worldwide, or doesn't it work like this?
Let's maybe say it that way. Communication equipment like we bring in together with other partners, satellite dishes, satellite phones, this can be, of course, sensitive equipment. And that's also something that we have to be aware of, and where we train our volunteers. This is basically, it can be a security threat for the individual carrying that equipment. The rules are different in the different countries, and it's not on us actually to decide or to evaluate, okay, what is right, what is wrong. I mean, there's certain conditions and that you have to live with. The UN, our partners, are in close contact with for instance, the government, to decide, okay, what is acceptable for them and what is not acceptable for them. And that's kind of setting the frame what we can do. So we're not doing anything against the will. I mean, we need still the permissions to operate there, yeah.
Okay, clear. Thank you.
If someone has another question, or maybe for other guests, or maybe our guest too.
Yeah, maybe just
to
add one thing on that. That's why this access control is also important, that we really have control of who's using the network, so that we can also justify, you know, this is what we, or display, put a display, this is what we're doing. Yeah. So just maybe to add that in.
Lars, a question. So what are the requirements if you want to join the group of volunteers? let's say I want to join?
Yeah. The first requirement is you have to be an Ericsson employee. That's a matter of insurances and leveraging from our company infrastructure and mechanisms. And the second is the will to contribute. So it's not about very specific knowledge that we are using, that we need an expert now on this or an expert about of that. The volunteers are growing into this program over time, so there are trainings together with the partners so that they understand the context, and especially the equipment that we are using, if we are talking now about technical people. So let's say technical interest is important. If let's say a line manager comes and say, I want to be part of the program, okay, there's not too many people to be managed, honestly. But if that person says, I have a big interest also in this kind of technology and I'm playing around, it's sometimes a good compensation to their normal work to say, this is more like a spare time activity in that moment, and for them that they can really follow their interest. And
okay, thank you.
All right, other questions? No? Then thank you very much, everyone.